All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're exploring a pretty brutal era in American history, a time when the weekend literally did not exist. We're heading back to the early 1900s. The gears of industry are spinning at maximum speed, but they're being fueled entirely by the unregulated exhaustion of everyday people. We're talking everyone from logging crews in the forests to domestic servants who were working invisibly from dawn to absolute dusk. Think about it. We take basic workplace safety, regular hours, and, of course, our weekends completely for granted, right? Friday evening rolls around, we clock out, we head home. But it is so crucial to ask who actually paid the price in blood, sweat, and, well, literally missing fingers for those rights. Because these standards, they definitely weren't just handed down by generous industrial magnates. They were hard-fought victories won in environments that, honestly, today, we'd consider totally unimaginable. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start off with the progressive era context, head out to the 16-hour days in the forests, plunge into 10-hour shifts underground, look at the total lack of safety nets, and finally, winning the 40-hour week. Okay, part 1, the progressive era context. Back in the early 1900s, we're basically looking at the clash of the century. On one hand, you have massive industrialization. The goal is maximum output, and human labor is treated as, frankly, a completely expendable resource. But on the other side, the progressive era is emerging. This was a massive push for social reform to counteract those exact dangers. Reformers are cracking down on corruption, they're demanding new protections for workers and consumers. Society is finally looking in the mirror and asking, hey, if we're building this mighty, energetic nation, shouldn't we maybe do something about the staggering dangers inside our own workplaces? Moving on to part 2, 16 hours in forests. To really grasp the sheer physical toll of this era, you just have to look at this number, 16. Loggers out in the virgin northwest forests of Douglas fir were working up to 16 exhausting hours in a single day. And they were doing this to supply massive sawmill operations that were cutting up to 8 million board feet of timber every year. I mean, to put that in perspective, that is enough to fill an entire cargo ship every single week. The output was historic for sure, but the human cost was just immense. Life in those logging camps and sawmills was honestly a nightmare of hazards. Every single day, guys were at risk of being crushed under a falling tree, mangled by a snapped cable, crippled by a fall, or maimed by a poorly aimed axe. And then inside the mills, they're dodging these massive, high-speed circular blades that would slice through absolutely anything in their path. As for modern safety equipment, yeah, that simply was not part of the equation yet. Actually, if you were to visit one of these logging towns, the workers were instantly recognizable. You'd see these outsized figures in blue and white pinstriped hickory shirts, wide suspenders, and heavily spiked boots called caulks. They pronounced it corks, which had metal spikes to keep them from slipping on the wet timber. But tragically, they were also super identifiable by their injuries. It was incredibly common to see men missing a finger or even a chunk of their hand, just from a quick encounter with a saw blade or an axe slip. And off the clock? Well, things didn't get much better. Home was a bunkhouse, which was essentially just a large, crowded tent with absolutely zero bathing or laundry facilities. The wooden bunks had straw mattresses that were practically crawling with vermin. And dinner? That was prepped by the camp cook, affectionately nicknamed the gut robber, who basically served up endless salt pork and lard. In fact, if a tough old ox happened to break its leg dragging timber on the skid road, you could bet good money it was going to be gracing the dinner table the very next day. Let's dive into part 3, 10-hour shifts underground. So, from the towering forest of the Pacific Northwest, we're plunging 40 feet straight down, right below the paved streets of Chicago. And here we hit another grueling number, 10. The typical daily shift for industrial and tunnel workers was a solid 10 hours. This was the brutal reality for hundreds of men building and operating this massive, narrow-gauge freight network right underneath the city. Just imagine the claustrophobia here. These guys were moving an unbelievable amount of material, over 600,000 tons of freight, excavation dirt, coal, and ash in just 1 year. We're talking 500 to 600 train movements every single day, using 132 electric locomotives. And the kicker? All of this is going down in incredibly tight, 6-foot-wide tunnels 40 feet underground. Their only real ventilation was just the natural piston effect of the trains pushing stale air around as these squeezed through the dark. Now, as you might guess, the labor situation down there was a powder keg. In 1908, when these tunnel workers tried to organize and join the Amalgamated Association Union to, maybe improve their working conditions, they faced immediate and total retaliation. The company flat out refused to recognize the union, so all 260 employees went on strike. A local congressman even tried to intervene, but nope, every single one of them was permanently fired. The company just shipped in strikebreakers, completely replaced the workforce, and left the striking guys entirely out in the cold. Which brings us to part 4, zero protections or safety nets. That swift, ruthless firing in Chicago really highlights this terrifying reality that united workers everywhere back then. Whether you were a tunnel worker, a logger dodging trees, or a domestic servant working invisibly from dawn to dusk, you had zero safety nets. I mean, literally none. No pensions for when your body inevitably gave out, no holidays, no paid vacations to rest up, and absolutely no health or welfare plans for when you got injured on the job. These exhausted folks were operating entirely on a tightrope, and there was absolutely no net beneath them. Finally, part 5, winning the 40-hour week. Fortunately, this relentless grind was not permanent. The shift actually happened surprisingly fast. Take the paper mills, for example. In 1928, mill employees were grinding through massive days for just $4.50 a day. But then the Great Depression hits, and federal interventions step in. By 1933, the National Recovery Act mandated 4 6-hour shifts, mainly just to spread the available jobs around. And that set the stage for 1934, when union reps finally got the leverage they needed to negotiate landmark, legally binding labor contracts. By Christmas of 1934, something incredible happens. Starting with just 12 brave mill workers who initially decided to organize, unions managed to secure an absolute game changer, the 40-hour workweek. They also hammered out a 15% salary increase for men and a 10% increase for women. Through these super precise, hard-fought victories, that dark era of unregulated industrialization finally started giving way to the modern labor rights that we know today. So the next time Friday hits, you clock out and you're enjoying your weekend, maybe take a second to think about that ongoing evolution of workers' rights. That 40-hour week and the safety standards we expect today, they were paid for by the intense struggles of those early 1900s laborers. Which really leaves us with one big question. What battles being fought in our workplaces today will our own grandchildren eventually just take for granted? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking questions.